Hi, everybody. How are you? I am thrilled to kick off today the fifth annual SB Chat PE Summit. I am very, very excited that you're all joining us today on a Saturday. And I got to tell you, as a supervisor, I would love to hear that my teachers are trying to be growth experts and learn more about the field. And I just couldn't be more thrilled. So on behalf of your administrator and your buildings that you're going to go back to, well done. So I'm really excited to talk to you this morning about stereotypes and how we get rid of them and how we convince people that they're no longer appropriate. Hi, I'm Judy LoBianco, past president of Shape America, and I'm really excited to join you about something that I've been advocating for many decades, and that is, how do we earn the respect of those around us? So we're going to explore the next 40 minutes trying to figure this all out together, and I'm excited that you can join me. I'm going to share my screen with all of you here. Here we go. All right, can everybody see that? Cool, super cool. I'll get my face out of the way. So welcome, and really excited to have you around challenging the physical education stereotypes. And one of the first things I think about when we talk about stereotypes in PE is to recall our own experiences. I always start with this when it comes to asking principals and Board of Ed members and folks that are outside our field to really think about their experiences in PE, because oftentimes they internalize those ideas. So let's do this visually together, shall we? So I want you to think about your own physical education experience. Now, I know that most of you are professionals in our field, so you're probably going to be like, oh my God, I had the best time because I was so good at everything. But really close your eyes for this visual and get a mental picture for yourself about what your experiences were like. So let's just take a second to do that. Do you have it? You know, I can tell you that I didn't have exactly the best physical education experiences K through 12. There were some days that I was very embarrassed in PE, some days where I felt challenged, some days where I felt confident, some days where I didn't think my teacher was all in for me, and other times when I was inspired to become a physical education teacher. So isn't that cool? So one of the really important things about this exercise is to be able to make sure that people become in touch with the messages that they get, that they internalized about what physical education is for them. And then we in turn have to be the champions that overturn the stereotype that people are feeling around this, because what they're taking into their adulthood may or may not be true, right? So the way I say it, it's always the good, the bad, and the ugly around these stereotypes. And if you're old enough, like me, to remember this movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, uh, we're going back a long time. This is one of my favorite movies of my dad. He used to always like walk around the house going, wow, 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 wow. But I digress. So the good, the bad, and the ugly of our profession includes some of these really offensive stereotypes around our field. So take a look at that list. Dodgeball obviously is one of the top ones. I was just on a New York TV show called Inside Edition, trying to defend the reason why we don't use dodgeball in physical education anymore. And, you know, they gave me my 30 seconds of fame and talked about adult dodgeball leagues. And a few days after that aired, I got a lot of hate mail, a lot of hate mail about how I am destroying children by not letting them play dodgeball in physical education. So, I mean, the intense emotions around this particular game are still very, very much out there, even among our field. So isn't that interesting? And then all these other pieces, things that we just don't do anymore, things and philosophies that we just don't engage in anymore. And here's the piece, right? We can't be this stereotype because these things, sadly, still exist in our profession. And for me, it's really one of the major reasons why we can't get out of our own way. And I've been flying across the country trying to convince people that we have to have the courage to meet these people where they are in their gymnasiums and say, look, this is the PE of the 70s. You got to knock this off because you're doing harm to kids. Tragically, it only comes when there's a kid that gets hurt. physically, emotionally, or socially hurt by a teacher, that it comes to the attention of others, when really all the signs were there all along that this teacher was doing harm, and we all stood around and did nothing about it. That, for me, really does a disservice, because when we're in this profession and we're all in and champions for this profession, we're in it for every child, not just for the ones on our roster. You know, I come back to the cliche that if there's a bad PE teacher out there and it was your kid in that person's class, I doubt very much if your kid came running home from school and said, my teacher emotionally hurt me today or socially embarrassed me today, that you wouldn't be banging down the door of that schoolhouse saying, excuse me? And so for me, every one of them is my kids. And in the end, especially when you're an administrator, at the end of the day, you've got to drive home and say to yourself, look, were the decisions I made today the very best decisions for kids in this scenario? And sometimes that does not fall on behalf of the teacher, especially if they're engaging in activities such as these. Right. And the last one is kind of like for our physical education community. There's a lot of times where I really enjoyed PE because I was really good at particular sports, and they really fostered in me the ability to do well and be successful. And the feelings around being successful make you love it more. Right. So, yeah, there were some sports that I wasn't too good at. Archery comes to mind, but others that I was really good at, like volleyball and basketball. So, as folks in our field, it's really easy to have that connection with loving sports and being, saying we had great experiences in PE. Were we playing sports, though, with no learning going on? That's another question we have to ask. I interview many candidates for teaching jobs and have for the past 17 years. And when I ask them why they want to become a physical education teacher, I'll often get the answer that they've always loved sports and they've always been an athlete. And when I ask them why they want to be a teacher, it confuses me, why they would go right to talking about themselves, when really a teacher, by virtue of what they do, they give their life away to children. And so it would make more sense to me that they would lead with an answer such as, because I have such a desire to help children be healthy and well. And really, as we've evolved as a profession, we've really redefined what physical education is supposed to do for kids. And it's really important that we start to acknowledge that these stereotypes are so far apart from where we are now. Where we are now is to make sure that kids feel confident about what they do in our classes, and they feel the competency necessary to be able to engage without feeling like they fail every time, right? As we know in the SEL world, failure is a really important way to learn, but at the same time, if you are not good at a particular skill and you are on display in front of your peers and you constantly can't make the basket or shoot the goal, that does something to a kid. And so these stereotypes kind of feed into those kinds of things. And what we want to be able to say is we're working under the umbrella of physical literacy now. And physical literacy means, can the child feel some confidence and be competent about what they're doing at their own ability? And so, one of the things I talk about is, when I go into an elementary PE setting, I shouldn't always see kids throwing with the same object from the same distance at the same size target, because everybody's in a different place. So while some kids are challenged by that, other kids are not challenged at all, and other kids are struggling. So it's really important that we give kids a variety of differentiation so that they feel competent and then therefore can feel confident. So this good, the bad, and the ugly are these pieces that are just so far behind us. And I mention this because in order to dispel the myths and stereotypes of PE, we have to first work to have a quality program. So this is a slide that I'm sure all of you on this in this summit clearly have seen a million times before. And this time, I'm not offering it to describe to you what happens to the brain. I'm simply going to give you the tagline, oh my goodness, what a difference one little picture can make. So as you look at this, and we know that this is the brain getting active after being able to walk, and kids have better academic tests after they've had activity, and all the research is there. I'm not asking you to do research today, but I am asking you to take a look at this slide and understand that this slide by Charles Hillman changed our profession forever. because this was the slide that started to communicate research to those outside of our profession. We went from being a stereotype to being a very viable part of an academic program, one that serves the whole child, one that has sustenance, one that digs their heels in deep around major educational issues as a result of what changes go on in the brain because kids have physical education. This slide, this is one of my favorite slides in our profession, and it keeps coming up in presentations over and over and over and over again because of the value that it has to help others understand that we're not just throwing around rolling balls, and we're not teachers that have our feet up and are reading the newspaper, right? So this slide for me was a game changer in our profession. And it goes back to 2009. So for 10 years, we've had this slide helping us in our profession, being able to have talking points around common language for those stakeholders who are not PE and health teachers. Which tells me that we've been at this a whole lot longer and knew a whole lot more, a whole lot earlier than any admins did, than any classroom teachers did, than any social workers did around the benefits of physical education during the school day. So we know that this impact on academic achievement is completely undisputed. We know that active kids learn better, and that this piece of the advocacy is so very important, because while I say we're going to dispel the myths and make sure that we can break down the stereotypes, you've got to have in your toolbox those things which people want to hear. You've got to speak common language and make sure that you are hitting those types of things that are going to resonate with them. So, for example, if you're a school principal and you see a slide like this, it's going to have a great impact on you. It's going to say to you, wow, maybe I should start paying attention to what's going on in the gymnasium because it's an academic classroom. I think that one of the ways we break down these stereotypes is to help the principal understand that there is true and actual learning going on that affects the child, both in physical education class and outside physical education class. One of my favorite slides here about the meat behind the research around what happens. And this very much resonates for boards of education, superintendents, principals, classroom teachers, the power of physical activity during the school day and the power of a bout of exercise in physical education. So really, really important slide here around what's happening for kids after just one physical activity lesson in particular. It's sad, how we have to sell what we do after all these years because it should stand on its own merits. But at the same time, we took that on as physical educators, understanding that for decades, advocacy was as much a part of who we needed to be as any other part of who we were. I think one of the pieces that I really have watched grow over the past few decades is this relationship piece. I think nowhere else in a class, in a school culture, nowhere else in a school building can you see the unique relationship that teachers have with students than you do in physical education. It is a very unique environment. It's asking kids to go back to what they naturally do, which is to move. And kids can, if they try and if they want to, and if teachers try and they want to, they can forge a very special and positive relationship that no other teacher has the benefit of having. So I think our specialness and our uniqueness is a very big part of this. And then there's the whole piece about social emotional learning. And, I mention these pieces because breaking stereotypes is about speaking the language of what people want to hear, right? So social emotional learning is obviously a big deal in our schools right now, battling mental illness and making sure that kids are less stressed and depressed and anxious. And when we were at the Shape America convention in Tampa, I was on stage and I said that we invented social emotional learning. And in some ways, I truly believe that because we have that unique lens. We see every kid, we know every kid, and we get to see kids succeed and fail by virtue of the way they move and the way they think. So I think what's really important for folks outside the profession to know is that all of the facets of social emotional learning that help strengthen a kid's ability to cope with their life and cope with their stresses can be found embedded in almost every physical education lesson. And I would urge you, if you're not already reading up on SEL, as we call it, and not embedding these types of pieces in your lessons, that you really truly think about this school year being mindful about communication and teamwork, problem solving and conflict resolution and cooperation. You see it happen in your classes every single day, kindergarten through 12. These are the facets of a strong physical education program that fosters these pieces. And when kids are struggling, it's the teacher's responsibility to get in there and say, look at this opportunity we have to learn more about how we're feeling and how we resolve this. So I think it goes without saying that not only the impact of academic success for kids, as in the last slide, but here around social emotional learning, there is clear connections between our national health education and physical education standards and social emotional learning in both health and PE. So I think this can't be ignored. And I also think that one of the ways we break down that stereotype for those outside the profession is to make that connection, because then you'll be heard. And it's sad but true. Once you say something about, hey, you know, I have the answer to academic success in our school, or I can foster an environment and school culture around social emotional learning, someone's going to start listening, particularly someone who's interested in making sure that children are fully and readily present when they come to school. And then here's another famous one. And I use this example, chronic absenteeism, for a very important point. When you look at the stats on the way the states have chosen to focus their federal education dollars, and that's ESSA funding. We call that Every Student Succeeds Act. It's the federal education law that now includes physical education as one of 17 subjects that gets federal dollars for making sure that kids are healthy and safe and well, and to make sure that teachers get professional development. All of the states, almost all of the states, chose that they would use their money to battle chronic absenteeism. And that's because it's a major measure of whether or not kids are going to be connected to school. Yeah, obviously, I mean, for all of us, we know in order to be successful, you got to show up. Could you imagine how excited we should be around the fact that kids who are physically fit, that are well, that are physically active, have better school attendance rates? My principals, when I pitched them this, they were very, very excited about this particular piece. Many principals are seen under the microscope for how many kids are absent every day. Absenteeism is a measure for the states, and they need to make sure that their kids are coming to school. And if they're not, they have to find out why not. So chronic absenteeism, a very big part of what interests those outside of our profession. And look at this, here we are just doing our jobs, making sure kids are fit and active. And here we are getting it done, knocking it out of the park every single day just by what we do. And, you know, I think the purpose here around changing the stereotype is your ability to step up, to be unafraid, to be courageous, to use the information, to be able to sit down with a principal, a board member, a superintendent, a supervisor who may or may not understand, a subject area supervisor who may not be a PE certified person, and saying, let me show you the ways that we contribute in ways that are outside the gymnasium. Very, very important stuff, you know, and the stereotypes are out there for a reason, and it's because not enough of us are stepping up and amplifying this message. So what does it look like? So there are a couple easy things that you can do to engage these people, to engage these stakeholders and break their thinking around who we are and what we do. One of the easy ways is to just have people call it PE. Have them call it phys ed, phy ed, physical education. Make sure fellow physical educators are using that language, and other teachers and admins start to use that language as well. Now, it may not seem like a big deal. You may think to yourself, Judy, in the whole host of things I've got to battle, people calling it gym is not on my list. But I've got to tell you, when I first became a supervisor, and even when I was teaching high school, when you did a great job and you went into the classroom and you gave your whole heart and soul for kids, people wanted to respect you and what you did. And even to this day, when I go into a meeting and someone calls it gym, do you know they actually correct themselves? They correct themselves so quickly as if they've said a curse word to me. Like they think gym is a curse word. And it's not that I've told them to use that language necessarily. It's not that I've told them that saying it that way is wrong, but there is an unprecedented respect in making sure you call it what it is. And I know this is an age-old thing, and many of you might be shaking your heads going, please, I'm not caring if someone calls it gym. But at the same time, building rapport and respect and breaking down the stereotype is to call it PE, phys ed, and physical education, to call what you're doing physical literacy, and making sure that you dispel the myths around the kind of academic learning that goes on in that classroom, and say the gym is a place that we go. Physical education is the content that we teach. So it's a very small piece, one that you could do right when you go back to school. Make it one of your goals to build a school culture around calling it PE. And if you're not calling it PE, really look at that and make sure you try and make that shift. So the other myth is about principals walking into your gym, right, and saying that it's lovely chaos. It's chaotic in here. Kids are safe, but it's chaotic. I hate that. I hate that. 17 years as a supervisor. And whenever I went alongside a principal and they stepped into the gymnasium with me to see what I see and ask them what they see, they'd always say, wow, it's chaotic in here. And oftentimes someone who's not a physical educator doesn't know that this is controlled chaos. It's chaos because kids are jumping, laughing, playing, screaming, which is the sound of our profession, right? Something's wrong if my kids aren't laughing. Something's wrong if my kids aren't telling each other good jobs. Something's wrong if my kids aren't giving each other a high five. It's a very unique environment, one that sometimes can intimidate someone who's not in the profession. So a superintendent, a principal, a vice principal, a classroom teacher, when you invite them into the gym, make sure they understand there's real learning going on and it's not chaos. The other piece is this, and this I have to say, tends to be a little bit of my pet peeve. When talking to principals, I often get that their PE teacher is the heart and soul of the school. Hey, I love that. They step up during field day. They coordinate assemblies. They step up for project aces. They do parent comes to PE week. And they talk solely about the things the PE teacher does outside of their learning environment. And they love their PE teacher for everything they do outside that environment. But then you've got some principals that never step foot in that classroom. What's up with that? I really want you to think about making sure that first and foremost, the quality of your instruction shines first. And then you become that superstar outside the classroom to build a culture of health and wellness. You're a teacher first. You're an academic first. You're a content expert and a professional. And your principal, vice principal, classroom teachers, and those outside the building, even parents, need to see you as such. And then they can see you as the Pied Piper. Then they can see you as the person that everybody comes to. Then they can see you as a person who works really hard on all those extracurriculars in order to make the building such a special place. But first and foremost, you're a teacher. And then I say this, I want you to be very purposeful. And the way to be purposeful and break down stereotypes is to make sure your principal or your vice principal are coming into your gymnasium invited by you, informally. And I got to tell you, if a principal doesn't take you up on that invitation, that's negligible. I got to tell you, the principal is the instructional leader, and a gymnasium is equal to any other classroom in that building, and they have an obligation, a total obligation to take you up on that invitation. So please make sure that you're bringing them in for informal walkthroughs, telling them I'm doing a really cool lesson that links SEL to physical, to PE and activity. You've got a really cool new activity you want to share with the kids today that links to a third grade math lesson, whatever it is. Or it might just be, look, I'm working on the standard around character building in the national standards, and I want you to see it. It's really important that they come in and they see that learning is happening, that kids understand it. It's important that they call kids over and ask them what they're learning and why they're learning it. It's important that they see your physical environment as a place where kids have plenty of visuals, plenty of music, and plenty of support, social, emotional, and physical support, and that your classroom is safe. So one of the big ways, particularly if it's your principal you're worried about in terms of breaking that stereotype, invite them into the classroom. Seriously. I want you to make sure that you also do step up in the building, right? Don't just lock your gymnasium doors and say the whole world doesn't exist and that's the way I like it. Make sure you are out there engaging with classroom teachers, finding out what unit they're in so that maybe you can tie in some of the stuff that they're doing into your PE program. Making sure that you invite them for a staff wellness day, making sure that you engage them in fun activities for their classroom. Turn them on to gonoodle.com. It's a great way, a quick way to get kids active in the classroom that doesn't cost them a thing. Little tidbits like that that help them understand that you're the wellness expert in that building and you've got lots to contribute even though you're not the math teacher or the science teacher or the social studies teacher. Really see yourself as equal to them and be willing to offer your expertise, right? Be part of that school culture, totally, right? And we do know that, in doing so, you're helping kids be active 60 minutes a day, which is the industry standard still through the CDC. And we don't get those 60 minutes by ourselves. They don't have 60 minutes a day of PE almost anywhere. But it's really important that we foster a culture that encourages kids to be active, not just because their PE teacher is telling them, but because it's reinforced throughout the building. Then it becomes a way of life. And then I want you to do two really important things related to federal funding. Your principals, your superintendents, your curriculum supervisors, they probably wouldn't think that you would know anything about the major federal law that I mentioned before. That's the Every Student Succeeds Act. And for many years now, we've been included in that federal funding, and we have a very specific set of titles that relate just to us. The first one is Title II, and there's lots of money in that pot, and it's for teacher professional development. Well, you're a teacher, and you're a physical education teacher, and you are entitled to that money too. So what's important about this for you to know is that states get this money, and then every school district in America has this money. Your district has this money, and you're entitled to that money for meaningful and relevant professional development in physical education. And so it's really important that while you're inviting your principal into your classroom, you say, hey, I heard there's this Title II funding under ESSA that helps teachers with their professional development. I wonder if there's any of that money left or any money available for me to be able to go buy a webinar, to be able to see a conference, a one-day workshop, to go to your state convention, to come to the Shape America National Convention. That's what that money is for. That money is solely for the purpose of your professional growth. And there's nothing more important for kids than for their teacher to have a growth mindset. So I urge you to read up on ESSA Title II and Title IV, which I'm about to explain right now. And for more information on that, you can go to shapeamerica.org/advocacy. So ask, make the ask. What's the worst that can happen if they say no? So make the ask. The other ask is very, very important. There is specific funding under ESSA called Title IV Part A, and it is solely for healthy, safe schools. That's us, that's social work, that's counseling. That's where all the money is going when it comes to restorative practice, when it comes to mindfulness, stress reduction, but also health and physical education. That pot of money is huge across the country. And again, every school district in America has Title IV Part A funding. In fact, you can find out how much your school district has by visiting us at www.shapeamerica.org/advocacy. Fill out the form and we'll be able to tell you how much money your district has this year in Title IV Part A. Oftentimes, if you don't ask, the central office just decides this is where that money's going to go. We're going to train everybody in restorative practice. We're going to train everybody in responsive classrooms. We're going to train everybody in mindfulness practices. If you don't ask, then that money will never be yours. So it's really very important for you to advocate and make sure that the people around you who have this horrible stereotype about what you do, that you're knowledgeable about federal law and that you're knowledgeable about monies that are allocated to help you become the very best teacher you can and have the most quality and effective program that you possibly can. It only benefits children when we do these things. And it's for children that you're asking, right? So really important stuff. We've got to change the hearts and minds of these people who continue to think we're something that we're not. And I'm passionate, as you can understand, to try and go door to door, school to school, teacher to teacher, parent to parent, to let them know that physical education isn't what they think it is. It's something that is life-changing for kids, something that's forever, something that's a matter of life and death. And you deliver that to them every single day. And you can't shun your responsibility on their behalf. It's extremely important. So how do we change this stereotype? The very first step to challenging it is to be this, don't be the stereotype, right? That's really hard for me to say. I go in front of audiences all the time, and I actually say, I'm not going to assume that everybody in this group is a champion. I can't assume that. And if you're not a champion, I basically say, I don't want you here no more. You're killing us. I don't want you in front of kids if you're not going to love every one of them and give every part of your heart and soul to helping them achieve in physical education, right? Long gone are the days when teaching is about you. Teaching is about them and your ability to give of yourself and of your time to every last child. And this set of slides and this presentation this morning is really kicking off a day at the PE Summit here, where you're going to hear those messages all day long from professionals in our field who feel the same way that I do. So it's extremely important to me that you understand that I don't know if on the other side of the screen you're the stereotype or not, but I know that you know one. I know that we all know these stereotypes. What good do we do children if we remain silent? I ask you, and I'm going to say something very difficult to you, and if you've ever seen me do a keynote, you know that I've said this before. And I'm from New Jersey, so it's okay. If you ignore a teacher doing the wrong thing in their classroom, and by wrong thing, I mean doing something dangerous, unsafe, emotionally bad for kids, or socially poor, if you watch that happen and say nothing, you are as guilty as the person doing it. Dramatic pause. You're as guilty because if that was a child in your class, if that was your own child, you'd be moving like nobody's business to get it corrected, right? And I've seen it all. I mean, I'm not pretending like it's easy, right? I walked into a classroom one time and I saw a middle school PE teacher weighing his kids in front of each other, actually putting a scale in front of the classroom. And while kids sat and watched, he was weighing each kid and yelling out their weight. Seriously? That's the example I'm talking about. And we're not talking that happened 15 years ago. It happened like 5 years ago. And could you imagine if you amplify that story hundreds of times across this country with people who are doing actual harm? So I ask you, challenge the stereotypes, number one, by not being one, but also challenging those who are the stereotype. And I'm not saying that this is not a massive ask, right? We have an army of folks that are members of our state associations, members of our Shape America. They're on Twitter, they're champions on Facebook, they're trying to be better teachers, veteran teachers who are changing their practice because they have a beautiful growth mindset. But then there are the others, and there's still so many out there who are not getting to the resources they need, who are not acknowledging themselves as needing to change, who are not embracing the idea that if they're no longer interested in giving up their life for children, this may no longer be the profession for them. And it doesn't have to be health and physical education. I'm sure we've seen it in every other subject area, right? It's a huge thing to ask. And it's interesting to me, because when you first start out, you really love kids. You're motivated. You want to be with them. You want to do your thing. Something happens to people, and it's okay. You burn out or whatever happens, but you got to acknowledge that inside yourself and say, geez, either I have to switch it up or move grade levels or jump to the high school or find another profession. But I say this often. One of my new speeches in 2020 will probably be around, like, what are health and PE teachers doing on their prep? Because the prep, the time you get off to be able to lesson plan, like that's a very telling piece. And after 17 years in supervision and 10 years teaching at the high school level, I know what I used to do on my prep, you know, and I know what teachers under my supervision were doing on theirs, right? Because whenever I visited offices, I could see it. Are they watching television? Are they playing video games on their phone? Are they chatting it up, reading the newspaper? Are they being social with other teachers? Or are they planning for and thinking about children? What are you doing on your prep talks to me about what you value, okay? Especially in this day and age when we should really be focusing on skill-based health education and physical literacy and assessment for learning. On the prep, you should be doing your hardest work all day. Let me say again, on your prep, you should be doing your hardest work all day. Because when you're in front of kids, it's about you being the facilitator of joy. I just made that up. I love that one. We're going to say it again. On your prep, you're doing your hardest work. And when you're in front of children, you are the facilitator of joy. That should be the easy part. Being in front of kids should be the joy. Being with them, building the relationships, making sure that you praise them, you call them by name, you encourage them, you support them, you find out how they're doing. The prep is the most important part of the day. So I want you to remember that. And as you go back to school, or if you're in school already, think about that and observe those behaviors around you with your colleagues, okay? I also want you to consider engaging with your professional organizations, right? This is the pipeline to networking. It's the pipeline for cutting edge information in our field. And I've been both a member of New Jersey AFERD and Shape America since 1988. I've been for 31 years. And everything I was able to do in my profession, all the service I gave, the leadership that I did, the volunteerism, the grants that I wrote, the lesson plans I did, I can pin it back to those two organizations, teaching me how to be the very best teacher I can. These are volunteers and staffs that are so dedicated to advancing the field, so embedded in making sure that they give us the resources we need to be the very best teachers we can be. I would not have had all of the successes I had if it wasn't for New Jersey AFERD and Shape America. And early on, I decided that I was going to volunteer for these organizations in order to pay back just a fraction of what they had given me. So a connection with your professional organizations is key. These organizations vet material, they use research, they are giving you the very best advice in the field that they can, and that best advice isn't always necessarily out there. And I say to you, don't always believe what you read, because there are some things on the internet that may or may not be the best game for an elementary kid. Some practices that may or may not be the very best thing for your classes, but you can be sure that if you're getting your information from your state org or your Shape America, you're guaranteed to get the very best in the field, the cutting edge practice. I would also encourage you to branch out on social media. If you haven't already introduced yourself to the incredible, huge PE family on Twitter, including hashtag SBChat, get in there. There are so many really quick, relaxing, half-hour, hour Twitter chats that have been so helpful to me in the field. You've got people out there willing to give of themselves and of their time, much like the crew at SBChat, that want to share with you in the field and do what's best for kids. You know, when you're at this level where you want to give so much, and you know that there's 50 million children out there, you want to help every last one of them. And so interactions like the one we're having this morning are just so very important to our field. All right. I'd also say this: during the year, as you develop your professional development plan, think to yourself, how am I going to get better? I want you to read, I want you to listen, I want you to learn, and then I want you to share. Maybe it's a book, maybe you'll read a blog, maybe you'll listen to a webinar, or you'll check out some of the magazines, the periodicals that we have at Shape America. I know I get Jopered. I don't know if any of you get Jopered, but really great articles in that. Really pay attention to those things and try to grow and learn every day, just a little bit. One of the things I love is to get a nugget of new research or something new in the field that's come out of the research. And then I love to share it with everybody I know. And so every time I present in front of a group, I'm adding slides about stuff I learned. I just came from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, a week and a half ago, and Shape America did a social emotional learning conference, and it was just mind-blowing. It was so good. And I grabbed some of those nuggets, and I'm going to share them out this fall. So it's those kinds of things, being excited about what's new, being excited about what you can share for and about kids that make it worthwhile. So in closing, I want to thank Matt Bassett and the crew from SB Chat for inviting me to be on this morning. I want to thank all of you for taking time out on a Saturday morning to join me to talk about stereotypes this morning, and hope you catch some more sessions this morning. I wish you such a great school year, and I want to thank you on behalf of Shape America's Board of Directors for doing what you do every day in and out for kids, bringing your passion, for bringing your knowledge, for bringing all of your skills to live a life as a physical education teacher. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. Now, I'm going to kick it back over. I want to thank you all so much. This is Judy LoBianco dropping the mic. Have a great day and an outstanding school year.